Let me invite you to take out your message guide if you would, and you can follow along with the message in that way. I invite you to do that. You can also take your copy of the scriptures. We invite you to turn this morning to Matthew chapter 9. That's going to be our primary text, and that would be page 857 if you're using the Bible that's there in front of you. Well, we are in the midst of series throughout this year of messages that are focusing on the idea of magnifying Christ. We want to magnify Christ in each and every area of our life. And so we have been highlighting some of the areas and what Scripture has to say with regard to those things. Life is full of seasons, and I spoke about that just briefly in my newsletter our Friday update. We've just entered and are entering the fall season. And I think it was last week I noticed the tree, which is near our townhouse, the leaves were already falling off. And I was like, I can't believe we're already losing the leaves. It's already fall. And one of the cool things, or the nice things about Massachusetts, is you get to experience all of the different seasons. There is a summer. It was a little cooler this summer, I thought, than it might otherwise be. We get springtime. We get winter. I'm looking forward to a good winter. Pray with me for that. Or if you want, you can pray for me, whichever fits for you. But now we're in the fall, and fall is known as the harvest season. It's the season where we bring in the crops. And finalize that whole growing thing that's been going on. You're going to notice when you come in the walkway there towards the main door, we have a table there, and people have been sharing some of the things that are a part of their harvest this year. And there were some tomatoes that are out there this morning, so if you're a tomato person, there were some juicy looking tomatoes out there if you want to grab some of those up. But we are talking about the issue of harvest. And one of the things I saw in the news a couple of weeks ago was that a number of mass farmers are applying for aid because of the wet summer, because of damaged crops, just too much rain. And so it kind of begs the question, if you would, if it is a season and it is the harvest season and there is crop there, what happens when the crop is not harvested? What happens? What happens? My father used to say, and he was a gardener, he didn't grow flowers. My mother grows flowers. And my father always would get on her because he would say, you can't eat flowers. Why do we spend so much time growing things we can't eat? And so he put in all the time to grow the stuff you could eat. She would put in the time to grow the stuff that, well, you see. But he would say, you know what? If you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you rot. And when the harvest is ready, if there isn't somebody to take in the harvest, what happens to it? It's wasted. It's left there in the field. And so that is also true, and I think it's important to think about the crop and the risk that faces it when there is no one there at that harvest time to take in that particular harvest. Look, if you will, in Matthew chapter 9, it's the verse that I asked you to turn to. And this morning, we're looking at the idea, and we're beginning that series on magnifying Christ and my witness. We're talking about harvesting, but not harvesting fruits and vegetables. We're talking about the harvesting of souls. We're talking about our witness and the idea of sharing the good thing that God has done in our lives with the lives of those that he puts in our sphere of influence. And so we want to magnify Christ in our witness. We want to be able to do that better, and we want to be reminded, what does that mean for us, and how does that change the things in our coming and going? And so in Matthew chapter 9, we see Jesus speaking with regard to this harvesting and with regard to this bringing in of the crop of human souls and the need to meet those needs that people see around them. In Matthew chapter 9, we're going to see this morning what I'm just simply going to call the big picture. The big picture. Today's kind of a big picture morning, and then we're going to unpack some of those specifics over the next weeks of this harvest season. And so in Matthew chapter 9, this is what Jesus says, and this is a little bit of what Jesus shares. He says this, "Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them because they were weary and scattered, like sheep having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, 'The harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest.'" So there is a harvest happening, and Jesus here shares this after a season of going through several towns. He's seeing the needs of the people and seeing that there were few people there to meet the needs and to minister to the people that were there in his comings and goings. So he's also going through and he's also sharing the good news of the kingdom, it says here, that God has come and his redemption is near. Meeting the needs, and now he says, I need co-laborers to come with me to be a part of this. Few are going to this harvest field. Few are going to meet the needs. Few are going to minister to these hearts. The harvest is ready and it's plentiful, but there is no one there. And so there's a question here when Jesus shares this, and I guess I want to use this to kind of prompt your thinking. I guess, is this a command? Is this a command that Jesus is sharing with the people or with us as we read it? Is it a command? It certainly is a question, and it certainly is an invitation. He wants people to see what he sees, that the people are harassed, the people there are lack direction, they lack a shepherd. He sees that they lack leadership, and he says, who's going to go? They need a shepherd. They need someone. There needs to be someone out there to bring them in. He's looking for people who can see a need and meet a need in the lives of these people. He says, pray, ask that God would send workers into the harvest field. I think we can take this particular passage and put it with other passages where we see God's encouragement to us to share our faith, and we can say, in some measure, yes, we are commanded to be a part of meeting the needs of other people. I appreciate that Al brought up the issue of the migrants, the refugees that have moved into Massachusetts as a whole, but also serving on the board of directors of the Gardner Community Action. When they first moved in, the CAC that we participate with in terms of helping with meals, a number of you have helped in that way. We have provided other things. The backpack program was a big thing this summer. Getting the students in our community ready to go back to school. 274 backpacks were put together by us and had items given to us to be a part of that. It really was a community effort, but you guys did a lot of heavy lifting in that, and I appreciate that, and our community appreciates that. But this issue that Al brings up with regard to the migrant individuals is something that we talked about at our last meeting in terms of deacons and how do we respond, what are the things that are appropriate for us to do, what do we need to consider perhaps another avenue for, and it's a discussion that we're having. I was just at the board meeting for the CAC. This was Wednesday evening. We have a little more than 30 families staying at the motel down on Pearson Boulevard, approximately 120 individuals represented in those 30 plus families. We're talking younger families. We're talking mothers with children. We're talking husbands and wives with children. We're talking newborn babies. We're talking children that are now in our schools. There have been individuals from our community working to get the children settled and into school, to guarantee that they have immunizations, to work through all kinds of issues with regard to paperwork and just the different things of life. And that's been going on and has largely happened in the last, give or take 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. And the question is, how do we meet those needs, and how do we minister to those individuals that God has put in our midst? I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. One of the things we regularly display in our program and in the announcements as they scroll are mission and vision statements. And one of the things we clearly say is we have a desire to be a multi-generational church. I think, and I've said it before, I think we really need to think about being multi in more ways than just generational. God has opened the door through the things that are happening in our world, whether we appreciate those things or not, that we are living in a day where Gardner, Massachusetts has become not only multi-generational, but multi-ethnic. How it happened, we can go back and forth on. But the issue is God has brought the nations to us, and what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? How are we going to harvest in that field? How are we going to do that? And so we want to think about that, and we want to act on that. In college, 1 week a year when I was in undergrad school was called Spiritual Growth Week. And they would bring in a famous preacher or, a church pastor or some influential Christian statesman or whatever to speak for the week to the students. So the workload, the class workload was reduced, and people could have more time and feel free to go to the meetings that were happening, particularly in the evening. And so one particular year, Stephen Olford, some of you may know who he is, some of you may not. Stephen Olford was pastor at Calvary Baptist Church in Manhattan for a number of years. He was a fiery, short of stature, white hair preacher, and he was just fabulous. And so they brought him in, and he was sharing with regard to Jesus' encouragement for us to go and to share the gospel. Matthew 28, go into the world, make disciples, go into the world, make disciples. And I can remember there's this little guy, and he hardly showed from behind the big pulpit in the chapel. And there are, 16, 17 of 100 of us in the chapel, and he's there, and basically you see maybe the shoulders and just his head. And all of a sudden there was this arm that flew out from behind the pulpit, and he said, go, go. And everybody's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I mean, it was an incredibly moving experience as he shared a passion for the harvest that Jesus saw, the needs that Jesus saw. And he encouraged us to be a part of it by going. The next day, there was some talk in the morning, but the talk really kind of broke in the afternoon. Some of the students actually took him up on it. And a bunch of students left that night, got in a car, drove to a nearby community, and they went. And they were preaching on street corners, and he said go, and they went. And I was like, what? That's good. Well, at least tell somebody you're going, But nobody knew that they had left, and they had to track them down and found them through word that just came, hey, are you missing some students? Well, we found them. It's one thing to pray that he will send workers. It's another thing to pray for the workers and not be willing to be one of them. It's one thing for us to talk about fields that are white for harvest. It's another thing for us to talk about the needs of our neighbors, our friends, our family members. It's another thing for us to talk about the needs of people that God is bringing to us. And for us to not be willing to be a part of the answer. I want to suggest to you this morning that if we are going to magnify Christ in our witness, we not only need to pray that God would provide, but we need to be willing to be a part of the answer. You need to be willing to go and to be part of the answer for what Jesus sees here. Do you see it? Do you see what Jesus sees? When you go in your comings and goings, do you see this? Our transforming truth for today is pretty simple. It's that all of us are called to be a part of God's harvest. All of us are called to be a part of the harvest. You say, well, trust me, you are right where God needs you. You just need to open yourself up to letting him use you where he has you. And so Jesus modeled what it meant to be a harvester. And if you look a little bit earlier in chapter 9, you're going to see verse 9. And this kind of sets the stage for some of the messages that we're going to have in the coming weeks, because you might say this is really kind of a study in the life of Matthew. And in Matthew chapter 9, verse 9, this is what we see. It says, as Jesus passed on from there, and again, we're at the more beginning of the chapter, verse 9, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office. He said to him, "Follow me." So he arose and followed him. I wonder, could there be any simpler message that a person could give than just follow me? Follow me. Could it get any simpler than that? 2 words. Jesus said, "Follow me." 2 words, and it happened. And you say, well, that's Jesus. That's Jesus. Yeah, it is Jesus, but there was something evidently going on, I believe, in Matthew's life that led him to respond to a simple call, follow me. I want to suggest to you that the people that we rub shoulders with regularly, there are some people who need more than follow me, but I think that there are a lot of people out there whose life situations and whose just overall comings and goings each day have put them in a place where something as simple as follow Jesus, follow me, is really all they need to hear. And they would say, what do you mean? Tell me more about that. Just follow me. And Matthew followed. We don't have to have any other background for this. But we do know that when John the Baptist was ministering, one of the things that was going on out there in the wilderness was that along the Jordan River, that a number of tax collectors and sinners were coming to him and repenting. Now, the tax collectors, and it says here that Matthew was sitting at the tax office. We know he was a tax collector. Tax collectors were Jews who worked for the Roman government to collect the taxes. They were taking more than they were supposed to so that they could get what they needed to give the Roman government and then have for themselves and perhaps a little more for themselves. If you would, some people would just simply say, hey, they were robbing their own family. They were robbing their family. They weren't viewed highly, and really they shouldn't because of what they were doing. They shouldn't be. They were profiting from their relatives. They became friends of each other because the Romans wouldn't have them and the Jews, their own people, wouldn't have them. They were outcasts. And so Matthew wasn't a person likely who had a whole lot of friends other than other tax collectors. The passage of scripture that Kathy read for us this morning was Zacchaeus, and we'll see him in a moment. And the truth be known, even as a chief tax collector, Zacchaeus probably did not have a whole lot of friends. If he did have friends, they weren't Romans because the Romans didn't like the Jews. And if he did have friends, they weren't Jews because the Jews didn't like him because he was stealing from them. So if Zacchaeus had friends, they were likely tax collectors. They became friends with each other. They struggled, and I think they suffered from loneliness. And I think that's evident, and I think it's obvious because when Jesus comes and says, follow me, that was probably the first invitation of any kind that Matthew had received in a long time from someone who wasn't another tax collector. There are a lot of people out there who are lonely, who are afraid, who are hurting, who are broke, people who are hurt and needy, and honestly, just one word would do it. One word would begin the harvest. So movement, history tells us, had begun among tax collectors. And Matthew probably had already heard that there was this movement going on. And there was Jesus. Jesus is the one that John had pointed to. And now Jesus had come by Matthew's office, his table, and said, "Follow me." Matthew chapter 9, continuing on, this is verses 10 down through 13. It says, "Now it happened as Jesus sat at the table in the house, that behold, many tax collectors and sinners came out and sat down with him and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to his disciples, 'Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?' When Jesus heard that, he said to them, 'Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance.'" So what's going on here? It seems that after asking Matthew to follow him, Matthew does something kind of unexpected. He didn't have a whole lot of training. He didn't bring a whole lot to the table, if you would, other than the fact that he could throw a party. And so he invites Jesus over to his house, and he goes and he invites other people over to his house. If you want a modern vernacular, he kind of threw a barbecue. He threw a barbecue and he invited these people who were not connected in any way, the lonely people, the broke people, the hurt people, the needy people. And he invited them to his house, and they came. A lot of them came. And let me tell you, they probably came in some sense because these are people who are financially, probably came free food, free entertainment, but many of them had also started following Jesus. They were interested, and so they show up. And the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees, want to know, why are you hanging out with these people? Why are you doing this? Why are you with them? And Jesus simply shows up to be with Matthew's people. It was Matthew's sphere of influence. And in this moment, if you would, Jesus allowed his reputation to be on the line. Now, I want to speak to something here with regard to this. Sometimes when we get involved in the harvest, we need to put our reputation on the line. Some of us like to be squeaky clean. Some of us like to be kind of like Teflon. Slides right off. No, that's not me. Jesus was willing to put his reputation on the line to minister to the people who needed it the most. He was willing to hang out with sick people because sick people were the ones who needed doctors. He wasn't the kind of doctor that only hangs out with well people so that he didn't have to worry about getting sick. Look at some scripture passages with me. This is over. The first is in Matthew chapter 11, verses 18 and 19. "John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton, a winebibber, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is justified by her children." Over in Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. "Then all the tax collectors and sinners drew near to him to hear him. The Pharisees and scribes complained, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" They came after Jesus for having a reputation for hanging out with the people who were drunk, who were gluttons. He was hanging out with the people who were tax collectors, obviously ne'er-do-wells, people who were sinners. Let me just say that he did not join in their behavior and the things that led for them to be characterized so. But he allowed his reputation to be affected by the audience that he kept. Now, I'm going to address something here that I think I may have addressed before. A lot of people would like to say, you know what, there's verses that talk about that whole idea. If we were to look over in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, it says, "Prove all things, hold fast that which is good, abstain from all appearance of evil." Now, some of you here are King James people, and you probably, if you were to read that verse, would see that, and I'm actually quoting the King James. However, if you're using the New King James, there is a correction there. And the correction is that it says, "Abstain from every form of evil." The better Greek translation is every form, not the issue of appearance. And so for years, in fact, centuries, people have said, I can't do that because it makes me look bad. And the retort to that has always been, well, look at Jesus and the things that he did. Doesn't that make him look bad? And you say, well, that's not what Thessalonians says. Thessalonians says the appearance. The better translation is to abstain from every form of evil. If we're going to be involved in the harvest, there are going to be times when we're going to rub shoulders, we're going to spend time with people who do things that other people look askance to. They don't like that. It's not good. It's not healthy. It's wrong. But you're not there to do those things. You're there to present an alternative. You're there to step in to a harvest field and to say, you who are lonely, needy, broken, hurting, you who are struggling with sin and guilt and all those things, follow me. And don't be surprised if somebody doesn't follow you. Don't be surprised. I've shared this story before, and I think I've shared it here. When we were living in New Jersey and I was teaching in the city, I had more time to spend down at our family's kind of cottage bungalow down on the Jersey Shore. My two sisters lived down at the shore, and my one sister lived and worked in New York City and had developed a lot of relationships with people in the city who were kind of movers, shakers, kind of thing. So there was a couple, two men, a gay couple, who owned a large home there on the Jersey Shore, on the beach. And they were movie promoters. In fact, when movies are breaking or being released, they do a release thing, and one of the famous places to do it is the Ziegfeld Theater in Manhattan. And they were in charge of putting together these release things and red carpet events and stuff like that. And so somehow my sister had gotten to know them. And so there were times when I was down the shore on like a study week or whatever, and she would say, I'm going over to thus and so's home. They've invited me for dinner. Do you want to come? And part of me, my first is like, ooh, what do I do with that? But then part of me is like, sure. And so I would go over and on numerous occasions had the opportunity to sit down, to talk, to discuss their spiritual backgrounds, the things of their lives, the things that challenged them, the things that, and it was an open door. Was it a situation where if people knew or whatever, it would be an issue, an appearance issue? Perhaps. But I wasn't concerned about the appearance because the issue isn't the appearance. The issue is the soul of the individual, and am I in a place where I can appropriately do that and it isn't a stumbling block for me? I can abstain from whatever it is that is going on. Abstain from the appearance of Jesus was willing to put his reputation on the line to be with people who were needy. If you want to put that into a sports kind of vernacular, be the person who's willing to choose the worst players and have a great time playing. Choose the worst players and have a great time playing. Jesus violated what you would consider all the common wisdom, and he chose Matthew. And he chose him out of love for those who needed him. Matthew wasn't the only person. Perhaps the pinnacle, even though we're going to spend our time looking at Matthew, the pinnacle is Zacchaeus, who we read about in Luke 19. Do you know the story of Zacchaeus? Well, we know the basics from verses 1 to 10 of chapter 19. But Zacchaeus is the chief tax collector. Zacchaeus is kind of the head sinner amongst the group. He certainly knew rejection. He was the worst, the greatest offender. But he, like the others, probably had heard that there was something going on amongst his compatriots, that these lonely, broken, hurting people were opening up and were coming to John the Baptist, and John was pointing them to Jesus, and there was something happening. So when he heard that Jesus was coming, he wanted to be a part of it. And so Zacchaeus, as we read, he was if we were to say, he was a wee little man. How many of you who grew up going to traditional Sunday school know the Zacchaeus song? You know, it's funny how many hands are going up. You would think that kind of, Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. He climbed up in the sycamore tree for Jesus he wanted to see. And he said, Jesus, and when Jesus sees him, Jesus says, you come down, for I'm coming to your house today. And so he climbs up into the tree. This man of small stature, but of importance in some respects, climbs up into the tree, shimmies his way up there so he could see Jesus. And perhaps he's even thinking to himself, maybe Jesus would accept me too. Maybe Jesus would accept me. And so in verses 5 and 6, these were already read. This is what it says. It says, and when Jesus came to the place, he looks up, he saw him, said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste, come down, for today I must stay at your house. So he made haste, came down, and received him joyfully. He cooks for Jesus. He offers Jesus. They do another barbecue. They came for free food, and when they came for the free food and the entertainment, they received a message of love and acceptance from Christ. Matthew, Zacchaeus, Jesus, seeing the fields that are white for harvest, the needs, people who have no leadership, who have no direction. And God calls on us to be a part of that and to share what God has given to us with those people. What would it look like for that kind of thing to happen at Bethany? For people to hear the message, go, and for people to actually go. Last week I shared about Jonathan Edwards and what he's talked about with regard to people whose hearts were lukewarm. We looked at the church in Laodicea, and he said that those people were woodlings. They are people who would do something but don't do anything. Woodlings. God expects better of me. He expects better of you. He has called us to better than what we do. I know that's true in my case, that there are a lot of times when I'm a woodling, when I would do something, but I find I don't. So what do we do? What do we do? We haven't reflected on this in quite a while. But on our slides every Sunday morning and out in the Commons are these little cards. And we spent some 3 or 4 weeks, about 2 years ago, kind of rehearsing this idea. That there is value in us approaching, and let's just say for some people, sharing your faith is a daunting thing. It's a scary thing. It's something that while you're reaching out to people who are alone, it makes you feel alone because it's you. You feel like it's just you. And so I shared one of the things that I think is valuable and important is for us to approach it in some measure all the same way, all together. So that on a Sunday, if you were to be a person who actually goes, that you could share your story or your experience with someone or where you're at in terms of sharing your witness and your faith, and somebody could say, hey, I know exactly what you mean because I this and that, and it was the same thing for me, and here's what I learned. And so we put these little cards out there, and we called it initially Pi Squared, P-I squared. And it stood for pray, invest, invite. Pray for individuals, invest in that relationship, Invite them into a relationship with Jesus or invite them to come out to church. Pray, invest, invite. And so on the back of that little card were people that we were asking you to think about that could be a part of that investing group. People in your family, people that you work with, your neighbors, friends, or just divine appointments that God brings your way. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to suggest to you that we really need to expand that. So this morning, as we kind of just take these last moments, I'm going to share with you what is our new card. I'm going to invite you to grab one of the cards from the Commons if the Lord lays it on your heart and you're saying, I just feel I need to do more with regard to the harvest, with regard to my witness, with regard to what God would have me do for people who are needy and hurting and lonely and need to know him. And so I'm calling it pi cubed, P-I cubed. So I added an I because I think there's an I that needs to go at the end that's important. And that's important is not the I, okay? All right, see, don't do that. Important's not that one. So let's take a look at what that might be. We're going from pi squared now to pi cubed. The first is this, is to pray, and that is the idea of looking up. Identify your lost friends and your family members. And then put them on the list and pray for them. Pray for a family member, pray for a neighbor, a coworker, pray for a friend, and pray for those providential moments. Pray for those individuals. And when you get this card, you're saying, oh my gosh, that's so much information. When you get this card, it's all on the card and it's self-explanatory. So just take the information and just let it kind of just sit there, okay? Don't feel like, oh, he said that so fast. Don't lose the moment for the want of scribbling, okay? Just let it be there. Pray for people. Colossians chapter 4, verse 2 says this. It says, continue earnestly in prayer, be vigilant in it with thanksgiving. Meanwhile, pray also for us, that God would open to us a door for the word, all right, the witness, to speak to the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in chains, that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak. So Paul here is saying to the Colossians, pray for me. Pray for those that I'm sharing with. Pray that the word would go forth and that a door would be opened for the word, for opportunity. Pray that the Holy Spirit would soften a heart, particularly the hearts of those that I'm praying for. But Lord, maybe today it isn't for me to share with one of those, and you've got somebody completely I never ever met before you're just going to put in my way. And it's my opportunity to say, follow me to that person. Pray, look up. Lord, show me these people. Second, invest. Invest. Look out. Look for opportunities around you to build your relationship with them. Invest in there. It takes time. Develop a genuine relationship, a deep relationship with them. Let me just tell you what, you can pray for a person all you want, but if you aren't willing to take the time to invest in that relationship, then you're going to miss it. It won't be successful. There may be the person who's just ready and on the edge, but the vast majority of people, they need some relationship. They need somebody to come alongside and to spend time, to share interests with them, to find out what they're excited about, and to be involved in their lives. The grace of Jesus demands that we invest in those relationships. Paul, in Colossians 4, he goes on a little bit further and he says, walk in wisdom toward those who are outside. Redeem the time. Let your speech be with grace. Investing requires grace. Let it be seasoned with salt. So I act towards them in a certain way. I walk with wisdom and I speak in a certain way. I speak with grace, that my speech would be seasoned with salt. So we talk about the things of life and we invest in that relationship. Investment. That opens the door and it allows you to invite. It allows you to invite. So we're looking out and around us for opportunities, and then we look around for opportunities to invite people to things. Inviting means inviting them to an appropriate environment, a conversation. Ladies, let me tell you this. In another 2 weeks, there's a great opportunity for you to invite a friend who maybe has never had any shoulder rubbing with Christians before. It'd be a great opportunity for your friend to come, to meet other Christian ladies, to do a craft, and to begin building some of those deeper relationships. Don't miss those opportunities. But invite people to be involved. And the ultimate invite is to invite people to know Christ. You need to be discerning with regard to what to do and be able to deliver a gospel message. Now, maybe you're here today, and I've been talking a lot about sharing your faith, and you're saying, well, I'm not really sure that I have a faith to share. And if somebody was to ask me to share my faith, I'm not sure what I would say. If you're here today and you can't remember or reflect on or know a time when you opened your heart and your life to Christ, today would be a great day for that to happen. Today would be a great day. We would love to have the opportunity to share about Christ with you and to extend to you that same invitation to follow him. Follow him and allow him to do what only he can do in your heart and in your life. If you're here today and that's you or you're not sure, then you talk to Al, you talk to me, talk to one of our other deacons. Randy Heimel is up here in the front. Mark Hebert is there at the back at the AV station. We'd love to have that opportunity to do that or speak to the person that brought you. Invite them. And then our final thing, which we didn't do before, and that's this. Once a person comes to Christ or once a person has that opportunity, I think it's important that we do this fourth thing, and that is involve. Involve them. Look forward. You see, when a person comes to Christ, it doesn't end there. It goes on from there. You got to look forward. And so you want to involve them in the things that are going on, and you want to involve them in the body of believers, the community of faith, appropriately, so that they can begin to grow and take those next steps that they need to take in their spiritual journey. So we pray, we invest, we invite, and we involve people. So here we are. And I'm going to end here. But I just wanted to set up the big picture for you today of where we're going in the next couple of weeks. And as we unpack this call on our lives to share the good thing that God has done in us. You see, if you know Christ, if you would, you're not a lonely person. You're a person who, even when it hurts, you know the comfort of Jesus. You're a person who, in the midst of the struggles, is able to stand sure and secure because he holds you and is a refuge for you. You've got something to share with other people. And this is your opportunity to begin to do that. And so we encourage you in that direction. Let's pray.